Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have a fellow Armenian, Abo Gumroyan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tigran. Pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody.
I've been following you on all the different social media, and I realized that you're going to be a father soon. Tell me a little bit about that,
am.
Especially during the pandemic.
Wow. Well, my son-to-be, my wife and I are expecting in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So it's actually been really nice. You know, we found out in January that she was pregnant, and September was going to be the due date, of course. I had some concerns because, starting from March, I was going to be on tour pretty much for like 150 days through the end of this year. You can see how that ended up. So it was kind of funny. I was in rehearsals for this tour, and I didn't even make it to the first gig. It was a brand new tour that I was on. So in hindsight, it's been really good that I've been around to, help my wife, finish the nursery because, as you know, the work that goes into it it's so much. And honestly, I don't know how I was going to pull it off, being out on the road 2 weeks a month and her being by herself here. Yeah. So it actually, I have to say, from this whole pandemic, there's been a lot of blessings in disguise. So I'm not complaining whatsoever. And it's been nice to take a step back from, the proverbial rat race and take a break and just reevaluate things, which we'll get into later. So
we'll get to your career and everything that you've done, but I want to go back. You grew up in Los Angeles, and then you went to UNLV. Why UNLV?
Actually, no. I was born in Los Angeles, and my family moved to Las Vegas when I was 2 months old. So
oh, wow. Okay.
I've been pretty much practically born in Vegas and raised there.
Yeah.
So, I went to preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, bachelor's degree in Las Vegas, just because my whole family is there. I have very little family in Los Angeles, actually, from the first big migration from Armenia in the late 70s, early 80s. Most of my family moved to Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
A couple of relatives from both my mom and dad's side, but the big mass of my family is in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was the obvious choice. UNLV was nice because they let me go out on the road and tour a lot. It took me a long time to finish my undergrad because I was just in and out so much, getting real world experience. So, and it was, at that time they had a state scholarship for, state residents where your undergrad was practically free. So I took advantage of that, and the rest is history.
And your studies were primarily in jazz at UNLV, but you went on to San Francisco is that classical music?
I did. So background to me picking up the bass, I was a very, very good violinist when I was from a young age.
Wow.
My aunt, Charles Dutoit, is a very well-known educator and pedagogue in Las Vegas. So I started as like a Suzuki violin student. But I never liked playing violin. I never loved it or enjoyed it, partly because at family functions, everybody was like, oh, get out your violin and go play for everybody. And I just hated that. So, then I switched to bass at 10 years old because my dad had an amazing record collection. I think I heard Weather Report or something, and I heard Jocko. I was like, okay, that's it. I want to play bass. And the classical thing came about, one day I was screwing around with the bow on the upright bass, and having a violin background, it came very easy to me. I was like, okay, well, I sound pretty good at this. So why don't I make a go of it? So I auditioned for San Francisco Conservatory in the classical program, and I got in. And that's really where I, honed my orchestral skills. I had a 1 or 2 year, subbing with the San Francisco Symphony. I subbed with San Diego Symphony. And I was, really involved in the freelance scene up there in San Francisco. It's very, 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 very nice area for classical music freelancing.
Yeah, and San Francisco Conservatory is, of course, a great place to play that genre of music.
Yes, yes, it was really good because you could get out of a lesson and then you would go 2 blocks and you would be at Davies Hall and you could hang out at a rehearsal and just take in all this amazing music and the amazing conductors. I really learned a lot over there in school and being on stage, playing in that section, really learning, learning how to play in a section is different how you learn to play at school. It's 2 totally different animals.
Yeah.
So that's where I really honed that craft.
Yeah. And you mentioned your aunt, Shaket, and I know of her. I've never met her, but I know of her. And she's also a member of the Las Vegas Symphony, right?
Yes, she's a member of the Las Vegas Philharmonic. Funny story, I actually, in college, maybe high school, actually, I won a spot for section violin for a year. Wow. And then I got bored of that because then there was a bass opening. So I was like, okay, let me try the bass opening, and I won it. So I moved from one side of the orchestra to the other.
Wow.
Pretty funny. So yeah, and I still play with them. Whenever they need an extra. I don't have my seat anymore, obviously, because I don't live in Las Vegas anymore. But I still join them quite regularly during their seasons to sub and whatnot.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're still playing a little bit of classical, but you've played with so many artists who are non-classical musicians. Mm-hmm. How's that experience? What are some memorable moments on tour? You tour a lot. What are some things that you could share? And I know there are probably so many stories that you probably can't share because they're probably private and behind the scenes.
No, not at all. I mean, it's I've had the luck of being able to play and sound authentic in a lot of different, bags per se. Mm-hmm. Classical and Latin music is my number one mm-hmm. thing I guess I'm associated with. Mm-hmm. People know me in that world. But I've always had the ability to kind of step into any role and deliver the job per se. I think like one of my highlights was with one that stands out, like I guess in the classical world, was playing with Ricardo Muti and San Francisco Symphony when he came to do a guest spot. My first time ever playing with San Francisco Symphony was Rite of Spring with MTT. Wow. That was pretty, I'll never forget that. That was pretty amazing. As far as the pop stuff goes, that's I think my favorite was probably like the first time I played at like the Latin Grammy Awards on TV. That was pretty awesome, being in the house band there. It's been a lot. Like I've gotten to see the world a lot. Outside of the U.S. It's been very very advantageous to get to see the rest of the world. So yeah, I mean, there's so many, but there's it's those are probably my two, like playing with San Francisco Symphony and doing all the TV dates. Those are up there.
Yeah, you were part of a Grammy Award-winning ensemble. Tell me a little bit about that experience and playing with them.
Yeah, so I got to San Francisco. See here, 2008, and by that time I had pretty much really established myself in the Latin music industry as a bass player. And, a lot of my contacts from New York and Los Angeles kind of put the word out ahead of time to San Francisco that, hey, Abo's moving up there. He's a really good baby bass player, be sure to watch out for this guy when he comes up there, get him some work. And immediately, like kind of when I touched the ground in San Francisco, I started working immediately. Wow. In the Latin music scene until I got my first like orchestral appointment with the Oakland Symphony maybe 2 years later, playing Latin music, paid my bills, paid my rent, because there was so much work. It wasn't uncommon for me to do 40, 50 gigs a month. Wow. Just playing Latin music or Latin jazz. And I was still giving out work to other bass players that I couldn't make because there was just so much work. So come, I want to say 2011, my friend Christian Tumalan and He's a pianist up there, and trumpet player Stefan Kuhn, who I had played with in their bands, their own bands respectively, and other bands in the area. Because, you know, you start playing with one band, a lot of players show up at the same gigs, and you know how it is.
Yeah.
So they're like, man, like, you know, we want to start a big band, like a Latin big band. Because the club, one of the biggest clubs in San Francisco at the time, now it's history, it's been demolished, it's an apartment building there, of course, was called Cafe Kokomo. And the only night they didn't have live music was Mondays.
Wow.
And Monday for a musician is like, that's our Sunday. You know, we usually don't work on Mondays, but a lot of us would be bored. We're like, shit, man, like, we want to play, like, we don't want to sit at home. So they're like, you know, let's make a big band and let's just go play on, you know, let's go play on Mondays. You know, we were doing it for fun. Like, you know, there was 25 guys on stage and we were just playing for the door because we didn't want to sit at home. And, you know, we all loved playing like the old school, like New York Mambo style music, Tito Puente, Machito,
wow.
Tito Rodriguez, that kind of music. And it wasn't being done on the West Coast at all. So I remember we started on January 2011 on Monday nights. At the first Monday, there was like 20 people there. Then the next Monday, 50, then 75. Then I remember in February, the place was at capacity. It was at capacity, like maybe 400, 500 people. And word spread quickly. And we're like, oh shit, like we got something going here. So we kept it going, you know, the word got out. And then at that time, Kickstarter had just come into play. And we Christian and Stefan started a Kickstarter so we could get, you know, raise funds to record this album. And so we raised enough money and then some to record a full-length album. And that was in the summer of 2011. You know, Christian and Stefan like really worked their asses off, and, you know, it was submitted and it won the best tropical category, tropical album at the 2012 Grammys. Wow. And we were going up against giants. We're talking like Mark Anthony, Sony Latin, these huge labels. And here we are, like this independent label, independent band from San Francisco. Wow. It was like literally like David and Goliath. I mean, my jaw hit the floor when I found out that we had won. So it was crazy. That was life-changing for all of us in wow. so many ways. So wow. That's how that happened.
That's amazing. That's a great story. A little bit about, you know, with musicians, you're touring all the time. What are some things that you do outside of music? Any hobbies outside of music?
Yeah. I'm a big time outdoorsman. Like I really love, I'm a like addict fisherman. Wow. I mean, you know, Mexico, Hawaii, Rockies, you know, a lot of the lakes in California. That's a big thing. You know, I dabble in a little bit of instrument repair. I collect a lot. Like collect and sell a lot of instruments. Like I'm kind of a gear nerd. I love buying and selling instruments. Wow. You know, I work out quite a bit. You know, fitness is always a big thing for me. Wow. So, you know, that's kind of relieves a lot of the stress. You know, I think, you know, when you're caught up in touring, you know, touring is really physical. Yeah. You know, especially if you're on, you know, sometimes you're not on the luxury to be on a big stadium tour where, you know, you're off the next day. But sometimes, you know, you'll end up, you know, you stop playing at midnight and then you have lobby call at 4 a.m. in the morning. If you're not in shape, you know, that gets taxing on you. Yeah. Yeah. You know, cooking, I love cooking, you know, entertaining family and friends, you know, the Armenian way, you know how it is. So that's always fun. But yeah, those, you know, that's my outlet there. That's, you know, that's what I do.
Well, the big question, why California? Why I should say, well, you were in San Francisco. Why LA? Why LA?
So I left San Francisco 2014. Yeah, 2014. So by the end of my reign there, yeah. I could already see the writing on the wall that work was starting to go downhill. Mm-hmm. A lot of the clubs that we were playing at, you know, developers were coming in and buying the land. They were just demolishing the clubs.
Mhm.
So, what started as 15 or 16 clubs when I got there in 2008 had dwindled down to maybe 5.
Wow.
And the cost of living up there, it was just ridiculous. I remember one year I looked at my tax return and I was like, holy shit, I made this much money, but where the hell did it go? It's crazy. So I made the decision to go back to Vegas for a few years. My dad wasn't in the greatest of health. That was one factor. Like, he was alone. And I'm like, well, let me go back there, and I would still come up and sub with the San Francisco Symphony almost every month. So it's not like I was really missing out on work. Las Vegas was affordable. It's a very affordable place to live. Plus it's home. I'm used to it. And I actually got a production show gig there on the Strip from 2016 to 2018.
Wow.
So that was like one factor. The reason I moved to LA was because that show that I was on was supposed to run for 5 years. So I think in the summer of 2018 in June, we get a notice that, hey, at the end of July, the show is closing.
Wow.
And I was like, what do you mean it's closing?
Yeah.
We're on a contract here. They're like, yeah, sorry. And I'm like, what do you mean sorry? I'm getting married in November. Much less I'm doing an Armenian wedding that I have to pay for in November. What are you talking about? So I was like, okay. And that time my fiance was going to move from LA to Las Vegas,
Wow.
to move there. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really make much sense now. So, and I always wanted to crack the scene in Los Angeles, with studio stuff and whatnot. I was like, screw it. Let me go there. And it worked out. I came to town and it was much like San Francisco. I started working really quick. Thankfully, some relationships that I had forged from years back with Los Angeles contractors, contracting Vegas musicians, I had kept that relationships and just, nurtured it. So when I came here, it was pretty much, I gave them a call, told them, hey, I just moved to LA. If by any chance, you need me for anything that, you can't find on your normal call list, let me know. And it just kind of blew up from there.
Wow.
So yeah, so this past August was 2 years that I've been in Los Angeles. Returned to the city of my birth.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So some bassists, that inspired you, whether they're classical musicians or other genres, some of the older generation, what are some names you could share with us?
As far as, in the jazz world, like electric bass, of course, Jaco, Marcus Miller,
Mm-hmm.
Larry Graham. Those are kind of like my 3 pinnacles. There's so many people now that are huge influences too, but my roots go to them. And of course, James Jamerson. Those 4 are really like kind of ingrained in my musical DNA. And that's from my dad's record collection. And that's the reason, I started playing Latin music too. It's, from my dad's record collection.
Wow.
I'll explain that later, how that happened.
Yeah.
As far as, classical bassists go, I was really into a Russian bass player that actually just passed away, Rinat Ibrahimov. He was based in London. Probably, I would say the world's best soloist.
Wow.
Solo bass player, but he was also the principal of the London Symphony Orchestra. My teacher, Scott Pingle and Stephen Tramontosi from the San Francisco Symphony, probably some of the best bassists in the world. Gary Carr, huge influence. As far as like bass goes, bass players have influenced me, but I take my influence from a lot of different non-bass players because I as a violinist, like I don't play. I've been told a lot, I don't play double bass like a bass player. I approach it from a different sound or stylistic point. So, my influences are very not from the bass world. For me anyway, how I hear things.
Well, with all your experiences, I'm wondering if there's ever going to be the Gumroyan album, a solo album, or is there already something that I don't know about?
No, a lot of people have asked me about that. I really enjoy being a sideman.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like, maybe that's why I get hired a lot. It's just because, I'm really not into flash and pyrotechnics. Yeah, I can do it, but it's not my thing. I'd rather just be there and be the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah.
Time is a big thing. It's like, album undertaking is a huge, huge investment with very little return.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but this is my Armenianness coming out. Like, if you're going to put time into something, you're not going to make something from it. That's the way I see it. You got to at least get a return on your investment.
Yeah.
I think I've been far more. I'm just being real. Yeah, the art is a big part of it, but there comes a point where the art is not going to pay my rent and feed my wife and kids.
Yeah.
It's I think a lot of people in school, they teach you how to play,
mm-hmm.
but the minute you graduate, I know so many people that they don't know how to network. They don't know how to get gigs. And my thing was, I was the other way around. In school, I was always working.
Yeah.
Because there's no better school than that for me than on the bandstand or on the stage. I would go, I remember like my first week in San Francisco, first week at school, master's program. I got called to sub with the San Francisco Symphony for 2 weeks. And in one of those nights, we had the school orchestra concert.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do here? Like, I have to take this class. I have to be in the school orchestra, So I literally went and talked with the president. I'm like, sir or ma'am, I can't remember. I was like, I'm I'm sorry, but I'm subbing with the symphony. Like, you can fail me if you want, but first of all, I'm not going to give up that paycheck as a student. Are you kidding me? And second of all, that experience, 2 weeks of, Mahler symphonies with MTT, you can't buy that with platinum for me, So, I think like the biggest like missing link that I see in music programs right now is the business side of it,
mm-hmm.
Because I think people forget that at first, this is, for me anyway, it's a business. Yeah, it's like, you're a musician, we're having fun, but you have to make ends meet. How are you going to pay off your student loans if you have them, or like, provide, you're going into music as a career, and you have to figure those things out. That's a big thing.
Well, you've collaborated with so many great artists. Is there an artist, a singer, a composer, an organization, or an orchestra that you would love to work with?
Yeah, a big bucket list for me would be, if it would ever happen, God, I would probably go crazy, like to play with the Philadelphia Orchestra, okay. Partly because my training as a bass player, how do I say this, pedigree-wise, goes back to the Philadelphia School of Double Bass Playing. Mm-hmm. So that would be a big like, wow, that would be awesome. As far as, like orchestras in the U.S. go, Concertgebouw or Berlin would be life-changing, but, that's, I don't want to say it's a pipe dream, but it's, that would be amazing. And as far as like, jazz and stuff goes, I would love to play with Tigran Hamasyan. That would be amazing. I haven't really connected with him, and that would be really, really awesome. He's a freak. Yeah. I mean, he's very, 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 very. He has his own thing going, and it's funny. Like, he doesn't sound like an Armenian playing jazz. Mm-hmm. If as is, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I wasn't born in Armenia. I'm Armenian, but I was born in the States, so I grew up in the States. So, you know, when I play, I play, I play like an American. You know, I play with that thing. You know, I'll say this in Armenian for whoever's listening. You know, the Arakelyan kam vor Yerevan gnatsի. You know, I would sit in with the guys and տղեկ ասում են այ ախպեր բան Ամերիկայի յուղի հետ ես նվագում այդ յուղ ունես մենք չունենք այստեղ, you know. They're saying you have that American grease.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, but you know the one thing that I hear from a lot of like Armenian quote unquote jazz musicians is you know, they're playing the language, you know, they're playing the Charlie Parker, they're playing the bebop, but there's that heaviness, you know, there's that Soviet heaviness that you hear at like yes, you know what I mean? It's interesting. It's very interesting. And it's hard to shake that heaviness, but Tigran has cracked the code, and he's meshed the you know, the sounds of Gyumri and Yerevan with the sounds of, you know, Hell's Kitchen in New York City. Yeah. And for me, that's I can't touch that. Yeah. He's done it. Yeah. You know?
And Tigran Hamasyan, I think he came to the States when he was maybe 15, 16, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. Yeah. He came to States, and I think that also had an influence. But he is inspired by so many different genres. I think I heard him. I heard an interview. It was like, you know, I love metal, and I try to incorporate that. So
the only other two Armenian jazz musicians that do that to me were Aseng Navagum and Haipes Chen Navagum is Armen Yustuns. The saxophone player who I had the pleasure of playing with in Armenia and the big band, and Vahan Hayrapetyan, pianist.
And there's a great duo with Vahan Hayrapetyan and Tigran Hamasyan.
Yes, there is. Yeah. But like, you know, I have to say, like, you know, visiting Armenia for the first time, this was like 2012, 2013. I was amazed to see the appreciation of jazz over there. And the level at which the big band is playing, you know, like my dear friend, and I call him my uncle. I've known him since I was a teenager. Another amazing bass player here in LA, Vigen Momjan. He put me in touch with Armen and like Vartan Arakelyan, amazing bass player from Yerevan. Like, and they had me come and sit in at a rehearsal at the, you know, with the Armenian State. Jazz band, and I remember it was like so hot, and like, you know, these guys are just playing their asses off, and I sat in on a tune, and you know, everybody was having a good time. Like, you know, here's this novelty item, you know, this, you know, Akhbari Chut from LA, you know, in Yerevan for the first time, and you know, everybody kind of lost their shit, like as if they've never heard, like, you know, bass player from America before, and you know, Armen was like, you know, do you want to play the concert with us? And I'm like, oh, sure, you know. And so I rehearsed with the guys for the next week, and all of them are, you know, they're my lifelong friends now. Yeah. And you know, but they made the level at which those guys are playing from from the Arakelyan Orchestra times to now, the level jump is amazing. Wow. You know, they're hip to the American stuff. Like, there are so many guys that like show me this American music and American jazz stuff that I don't even know about. Yeah. You know, so they're very attuned to the culture, what's happening here, and it's really nice to see that. I mean, there was one moment when I was ready to pack my bags and move over there. Wow. You know, I'm like, well, I gotta do this. You know, I was still single. You know, I hadn't met my wife yet, and I'm like, what do I got to lose? I was gonna, you know, they were gonna give me a spot in the orchestra to play, and then, but you know, I don't know what happened, but I didn't end up going. But it's the culture there and the music over there is a far cry from, I think, what it is even in LA. Wow. It was really amazing for me, because my idea of Yerevan was complete 180 from what I thought it was going to be, culturally, musically, everything. Wow. It was an amazing surprise, and to be honest, I like it there at times more than LA, if you ask me. You know.
Well, LA has a big Armenian community. I grew up in LA. I live in Seattle now, but I grew up in Glendale, California, which has a huge Armenian population. And my wife is actually from Pasadena, California. So we have
Nice.
lots of family in LA. Any connections with LA Armenian musicians or LA Armenians that you're currently working with or plan to work with?
None. Because you know, well, no, I shouldn't say that. You know, I said Vic Momjan. If you can, I would really interview him.
Okay.
If you can. Vigen Momjan is an amazing bass player, and you know, he's brought the American funk to the ethno-European side of music, and he's created a whole style all his own. He's one of my biggest influences. If there's anybody who says who's rubbed off on your bass playing, Vigen Momjan is in my top 5 for sure, without a doubt. So him. The only other, like, I guess, LA Armenian that I've really like collaborated with in a, you know, that sense would be like Artash Kartalyan.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, who literally actually lives 3 doors down from me. We live on the same street, but I don't. I mean, without sounding, you know, rude or anything, the really only like kind of Armenian stuff to play in LA. You know, it's Rabi's music. Yeah. I have no desire to play that, you know, to go play at banquet halls and stuff like that. It's fun. I'll be the first person to tell you, but like as far as like musically it goes, it doesn't do anything for me. You know? And I have my own opinions and stuff on, like, you know, quote unquote what Armenian music is and stuff like that, you know, that's, you know, that's a rabbit hole, but it doesn't really do anything for me. You know, I joke around with Vic all the time. You know, I tell him, like, if you ever want to see me, you know, choke and, you know, look like an idiot on a gig, like, go tell me to play an Armenian wedding. I wouldn't know what to do. You know, I can go play fusion, I can go play, you know, Mahler symphonies, but the whole Armenian thing is very foreign to me, you know, harmonically, you know, that's just not my world.
Yeah.
You know, you know, I have, like, the closest thing that I've come to that is done a lot of, like, the gypsy jazz. And when I say gypsy jazz, like, more like along the lines of, I should say, like, Balkan music meets jazz.
Okay.
I'll think like New York Gypsy All-Stars.
I was just gonna mention the New York Gypsy All-Stars. Yeah.
So my dear friend Panayotis Andreou, he's their bass player, and I'm kind of like the West Coast version of him. Like, he's a Greek guy who plays Latin music as good as, if not better than, most Latin people. But he can also turn around and play all the odd meter, you know, the Balkan, the Turkish stuff. And, you know, I've been into that music for a long time. So I think maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, they had a West Coast tour, but he was on tour in Europe. But the tour was already booked, and he called me. He's like, man, like, can you sub for me? I was like, yeah, man, no problem. So as far as, you know, like, Eastern Oriental music meeting jazz and the kind of stuff, that's much more my wheelhouse. You know, the odd metered stuff. And partly because, you know, my family roots go back to Western Armenia. You know, I'm a diasporan Armenian, so you know, what I listen to in my house, aside from, you know, Harut Pambukjan, which mostly, like, you know, every Armenian listens to, and maybe like Norekoch, you know, Akhbar Armenians, was, you know, Greek music and Turkish music, because that's, you know, my family is from Western Armenia, present day Turkey. You know, I speak and understand Turkish pretty fluently. You know, my grandparents, they still speak Turkish mostly.
Wow.
You know, so that music, I understand a little bit more because, you know, rhythmically, I just take to it more. You know, harmonically, it's a little bit more understanding to my ear, whereas, you know, more, you know, popular Armenian music today is like, you know, ripping off the newest hit from Baku and putting, Armenian lyrics on it. I can't get with that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a little blunt, but that's how it is for me.
You mentioned Vic Momjan. I've never met him, but Yervant Kalajian, who's a violinist. I think they have a trio together, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, string harmonies.
Yeah.
It's Vigen, Yervant, and Andranik Kazarian.
Yes. And I've had Andranik on this podcast. So yeah.
And three of my closest friends, I consider them my family. And what they do is amazing.
Yeah.
When the three of them get together, it's fire. It's
That's
absolute, it never gets old listening to those three. They've really elevated for me traditional Armenian music and brought it into the modern world for me. All these komitas songs they do, songs that you and I grew up listening to, but in a very fresh and modern way. It's you can't hold a candle to it.
Wow.
And it's much different than East Coast Armenian music too. There's as being in the American music industry, I've learned to dissect a lot of things. And even in let's say Armenian music, there's even in the States, there's an LA sound, there's a Boston sound, there's a Philly sound, and then there's the then there's the Yerevan sound. And for me, I can tell you what's what, and it's all so different. But string harmonies, they really set the bar high, I think.
Yeah, and oud player from the East Coast is someone who is doing a lot of work there. Is Ara Dinkjian.
Dinkjian's son.
Yeah.
So that type of music, the stuff his father sings.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I would listen. I was listening to growing up. Like I said, my grandparents, and even for a short time, my great grandparents lived with us. And where's my I think my great grandmother's from Tigran.
Wow, which is where Onik is from, right?
Exactly. So at Barbara, their jargon is completely different, but that's the kind of stuff I grew up listening to. Wow. Because then my grandparents, before they repatriated to Armenia in 1947, Gakhti Jamanak, they were in Greece. My grandparents are born in Greece, so they, this is my father's parents. They went to, they repatriated to Armenia in 47. Wow. My mother's parents, who are from Marash, by way of Beirut, they repatriated to Armenia in 48.
Wow.
So, my roots are definitely, they go all the way back to Western Armenia.
Wow. That's amazing. You mentioned a couple of names. I want to make sure we get to those. You said Artashes Kartalyan was a fantastic musician. He's one of the first people in Armenia to incorporate, ethno music as part of jazz, and he was very instrumental in Armenia to do that type of work.
Sure. I remember, Ardash and my aunt, my aunt Shake, they go back a long ways, and I remember one of Ardash's LPs in my dad's vinyl collection. I don't know if you remember Melodia, the Melodia label, in Soviet times, with his trio, with an amazing bassist who actually recently passed, Ruben Barkhudarian, Rubo.
Okay.
He was an amazing bass player. He came to New York to study with Ron Carter. Really, really good bass player. But that's my first exposure to Armenian music meeting jazz, and then of course Armen Martirosyan, Weather Report, Time Report, Arto. So that's that lineage.
Yeah. Those are great. And one thing I might mention is Artashes Kartalyan. I've taken a couple of classes with him when I lived in LA, and I went to Lark Musical Conservatory.
Oh, okay.
His son is now, leading the conservatory at Lark Conservatory, Ashot Kartalyan, who's a composer and a pianist. He's another fantastic musician.
Actually, my first exposure, one of the few gigs that I've, Armenian gigs that I've done was on the Lark and Maestro,
Vace Barsumyan.
Maestro Vace Barsumyan, they put on this huge concert at not Pasadena Civic, the other auditorium in Pasadena.
Yes,
I can't remember it now, yeah. But it was like Lark plus a band with a full orchestra for the Genocide 100-year memorial. That was a really fun experience. Lots of good music. It was fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
Vace Barsumyan, that's another, so many great musicians that we're talking about. Another fantastic musician who, as I said, I went to Lark Musical Society when I was growing up in LA, and recently went back to LA last summer to conduct their concert for their graduates. And it was going to happen again this year, and I was supposed to conduct that concert as well. And unfortunately,
was that the same time when we first met at Disney?
Yes, actually, I conducted the Lark concert a couple of weeks prior to our meeting. So, that was a busy summer for me in LA, but that was great. So awesome to meet you. I'm so and we didn't really talk much at that time. I think.
Yeah, no, I was busy.
Yeah.
So that's Vace is he's a real musical pillar here in. Here in LA.
Going back to your roots, and you mentioned your father and his record collection, a little bit about your family, a little bit about your parents and how they inspired you to be a musician, and what they mean to you.
So my parents my parents came to the States like 1978, 79 during the big, I guess, exodus, if you want to call it, an influx into, little Armenia Hollywood, as it's known today. My parents were always very musically inclined. My dad was a really good singer, guitarist, and accordion player, really involved in the music scene in Armenia in the Soviet times. And my dad was a self-described rebel, big-time rebel, one of his good friends was one of the founders of VKBs, that old school Soviet Armenian rock group. And, my dad was a real bohemian, I guess you could say, always was a rebel. I'll just put it that way. And he's, big time music lover, record collector. And from the youngest age, I could always, remember him with a guitar in his hand. And, I think my foray into music when I was maybe 2 or 3, my aunt was over at our house and she was playing the piano, and I started, singing what she was playing. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe the kid, maybe he has an inclination, and my aunt started me on Suzuki violin, as I said. And then, but, my dad's record collection was there in the living room at my disposal, which actually it's in that closet right there, the whole record collection. And there was so much stuff. There was so much stuff in there that I got exposed to. Jazz. My dad had at that time, probably every Miles Davis recording known to man. Bill Evans, Al Di Meola, Al Jarreau, a lot of old school stuff that I came up on and, informed my musicality, not to mention the horde of Latin music that my dad had collected that I was listening to from a young age, which ultimately led to my involvement in the Latin music industry. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but a lot of being in that scene, it's hard to be an outsider ethnically in the Latin music industry because it's such a part of their culture. But, the one thing that I've always prided myself on is, I know so many musicians from Cuba, New York, Puerto Rico, when they hear me play, they're like, oh, what part of the island are you from? And then when I tell them I'm Armenian, their mouth drops to the floor. And I attribute my success in that because, Latin music at the very base of it is all 6/8 based meter wise. So is Armenian music. Like if you were to superimpose Latin music on Armenian dance music, the two line up completely. So there's some DNA information there, but you know, like I said, from my dad's record collection, that's where I listened to everything. You know, my mom, you know, was a you know, big time music lover. You know, avid CD collector. Took piano, took lessons. My uncle was a very, very, very well-known percussionist in Armenia, and you know, conductor, all around just musical genius. Like if there's anything I know about, you know, classical music, it's from my uncle. He just knows so much. This is Shake's husband, Hike, my dad's brother.
Okay.
So I mean, the reason I play music is because of my old man. You know, he put a bass in my hands. He really pushed me to pursue music, because I think, you know, I don't want to say regret. You know, my dad always wanted to you know, pursue music professionally, but you know, that was hard in our Soviet times. You know, with KGB on their neck all the time, like don't do this, don't do that, and you know. And then when he came to the States, my uncle didn't speak English, my grandparents didn't speak English. Like somebody's gonna work. Yeah. So you know, my dad had to put that aside and you know, pursue business, which he did very successfully. You know, my dad had a garment factory at the age of 25, a year after coming to America. Like he's really lived the American dream. But you know, I think in many ways, my dad got his victory in seeing me succeed in the music biz. So like he kind of lived and lives vicarious through me playing. So yeah.
With all the experience you have, and I know you said a lot about that would inspire the youth to learn from your experiences, but any specific advice to young musicians coming up and getting into the music field or industry or businesses?
Yeah. Don't do it. No, not don't do it. And I'm being very frank right now. It's you got to have a backup plan. Mm-hmm. I came up in a time where, you know, I don't want to say it was the tail end of the good years to make a living from music. For me, it is, but it's good to have a backup plan. I mean, we're in the middle of one of the greatest examples ever, you know, with this virus and the state of affairs. Always have a backup plan. And I've just come to terms with this, that, you know, if it's not your livelihood, that's fine too. I think a lot of people, they measure your success in music by, you know, how much money you're making or how many followers you have on this and that, and, you know, all this BS. And, you know, I'll tell you frankly, like, my time in the music biz at the moment is kind of, I don't want to say coming to an end, but it's, you know, it's coming to a transition for me, that, you know, I've always had a canny ability to kind of see the writing on the wall. You know, like I saw it in San Francisco, I saw it in Las Vegas, and I'm seeing it now that, you know, the music industry after this, from what I can tell, it's not going to be the same. And for me, I'd rather do stuff on my own terms than to go play a concert to an empty concert hall or do a live stream. For me, you know, that's, you know, I didn't come this far to do that. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like, I've always been like this in everything. Either it's all or nothing. it's a bad thing, but, you know, my dad was a professional poker player. You know, he was great at it. And, you know, he learned about life through poker. And, you know, he would always say, son, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, what cards you're dealt, you know? And even now, like if I tell you what I'm going to school for and, the profession that I'm going into, you might think I'm crazy. I'm in paramedic school right now. I'm testing for various fire departments in LA because, I mean, the music industry is just, it's not where it is. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah, no, and and I'm very excited about it because, like I said, there's been so many blessings from this pandemic that it made me realize, what's important, and sometimes you got to take a step back to get some perspective, to see what's really going to happen. Like, I know the music industry is going to come back at some point, but I can't wait for it to come back. And I don't know what the new music industry is going to be. Yeah. In the terms of, like, in the hierarchy in Los Angeles, as far as bass players go, I'm not going to say I'm at the top. I'm at a pretty good level, but guys at the top, their work is dwindling. A film session used to have 6 or 7 bass players. Now there's only 2. Where does that leave everybody else? So, I mean, one thing that I've seen from this pandemic is sometimes when musicians get caught up in that ideology that, it's this or nothing, it can be detrimental, and you got to be adaptable, and you have to be realistic in some ways, and adaptability is what was led to my success so far in the music biz, because I can go play Beethoven 5 at 8 p.m., but then at 10:30 I can go play an R&B gig and do both of them well, and you wouldn't know that I just was in tails and a white bow tie, playing to a very ritzy audience, than going to play in a club, so, that's, and for me, it's like, it's not a failure, but, you got to do what you got to do. And, I have experience, in the fire and EMS field, many years ago, actually, I was involved in that, and I actually left that to be a professional musician. So now it's kind of going back to it, but that's always been my backup plan.
Wow.
As a fire truck just passes my house. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's, if the one thing that I can tell younger musicians is, number one, have a backup plan. The world is always changing. My grandmother always says, you don't know if tomorrow's coming or not. So have a backup plan. I would say, like, be wise on where you go to school. If you're going to be $100,000 in debt when you graduate from a conservatory and you have no job prospect afterwards, why? Take lessons. A lot of these professors at these big music schools, they play in an orchestra. So, if I would, like, go to that city, get a job, take lessons privately with them, because paying $400 a month to take private lessons with them is much cheaper than paying $40,000 a year for, I don't want to say a piece of paper. I mean, listen, that degree is very useful. Yeah. In some cases, it's very useful. But, for me, the greatest school of all is the stage. Yeah. And I think a lot of younger students or players coming up, they equate their playing success, their success in the business, to having that degree. Mm-hmm. Out of my graduating class at San Francisco Conservatory of maybe about, 200 people, I can count on my right hand how many people are still in the music biz.
Wow.
That's, and you know what? That remaining 195 people, they're going to be paying off a house that they never bought for the rest of their lives, studying a profession that they never went into.
Wow.
It's direct, but this is what I've seen. You gotta be adaptable. Yeah. You have to know, if somebody throws a right jab at you, you got to come back with the left. That's how it goes. Yeah. Just be adaptable. Have a backup plan. The one thing, with, I guess, I don't want to say retirement, but, my different direction now from the music biz, it's, you remember why you got into playing music in the first place, because it's fun. Yeah. Because when it starts turning into a rat race, oh, why did this person get called ahead of me? Why does this person have that gig? Yeah. It's not good for you. And trust me, and I'm saying that from a place of experience because that was me sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to that. But it takes something major like this to realize, what's going on. Yeah, that's what I would impart on kids. Like, be a musician, but choose wisely. Choose wisely what you want to do, why you want to do it. Because unfortunately with the music school industry, it's an industry, it's a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. There's much more supply than there is demand. Yeah. That's for me. That's my, a lot of people will tell you that.
Yeah. Abocan, it's been great.
Yeah. Likewise.
I think this might be one of the longer podcasts, especially in the recent months. Anything else you want to add before we end?
No, man, it's been a pleasure. I feel honored that you asked me to be on. And I wish you all the best. Hopefully we'll be on stage soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Hope to see you soon. Take care.
For sure. Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.